Hi there. Today we're going to be talking about types of firewood. Kind of how to collect it, what you kind of want to be thinking about with wood, and then what sizes of wood make a good fire. All right. So the things that I want you to take away from today is going to be three different things. Number one is going to be how we collect it. Number two is going to be the difference between hardwood and softwood, and why you would want one versus the other. And number three, how big do you want these pieces of wood to be to actually build a campfire? So let's go do that. So as we're looking around for wood, I want you to remember the 3 Ds for collecting firewood. The 3 Ds are dead, down, and dry. The first word is dead. So we don't want to be going over here to a tree and like breaking off branches. That's harmful for the trees. So we want to be looking for dead wood. Now we also want it to be down. We might find a tree kind of like this one over here that is mostly dead. This tree is mostly dead. There's not much going on with this tree, but at the same time, that's going to be a lot of work to knock it down and stuff. We don't need to do that for our particular work here. So we want to look for trees that are already down on the ground. Now the last one was dead, down, and dry. Just because you find wood on the ground doesn't mean that it's going to be dead, and doesn't mean that it's going to be dry. I have this nice stack of wood over here, but this has been here for a long time, and some of this wood is kind of soft, which means it's starting to rot. Rotting wood is moist and it does not burn very well at all. So this is wood I actually probably would not use for a campfire. So dead, down, and dry. If I come over here, I do find this little pile of sticks over here, and this could actually work. These seem to be dead, these seem to be down, and from the looks of them, they can be dry. One of the things that I can check on is if it is dry, it should, when I try to break it, snap. When it snaps like that, that's definitely dry wood. Wet wood bends, and it's really hard to break. Now, the next thing I want to be paying attention to is softwood versus hardwood, okay? Softwood, like pine, that seems to usually burn pretty quickly. Now, if I want to get a fire going quickly, that's good. Pine could be good for that. A hardwood is going to be more dense, it's going to be heavier sometimes, and that's going to be basically everything else. Maple, oak, birch, things like that. Pine is going to be pretty lightweight, and it's going to, again, get your fire started pretty easily. Hardwood is going to keep it going, so we want to use that maybe later on to keep a fire going. Now, as I look around here, I don't see a single pine tree in this entire area. So that means that most of the wood that I'm going to find on the ground is going to be hardwood, which isn't the worst thing, because if I just get smaller pieces, that could be helpful. All right, now we're actually going to gather some wood over here so we can do our next lesson. This seems like that same pile that I was looking at earlier. So I'll grab some pieces here. Pretty good. I'll grab this branch, and maybe I'll grab this branch. That's a big one. And if I need to, I can always come back. It's like a nice good dead branch right there. But I've got all of this stuff right now in my hand. This seems pretty good. So here I am with some firewood that I've gathered in the pile. And now we have to figure out what we need to build a fire. So the smaller the stuff is, the easier it's going to light. I want you to think about this. If I take a piece of wood and I just like take a big piece of wood like this and I hold a match to it, is this going to light on fire? No. So this is not good to start a fire. If I have a tiny little twig like this, I don't know if you can even see this. I inhaled a bug, great. This tiny little twig, If I hold a match to this, will this light on fire? It probably will, right? So we want to start out with this. Now I have these branches. This is typically what gathering firewood is going to look like. You get these branches, right? The smallest stuff that I want is something called tinder. Tinder is tiny. Tinder will snap in your hand when you try to break it. If it just bends, then it's probably too damp to use. But tinder is the tiny stuff that starts a fire. So if I take a branch like this, I can start kind of like taking all these little twigs off this branch. And if you see, I'm just kind of gathering them in my hand, right? And usually when I am getting tinder together, I just kind of make it about the size of my fist. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I kind of just make a little pile. If you want a really good fire, you're going to want to have a lot of tinder. I'm going to say about 2 fistfuls of tinder. And that's going to make a nice, good fire. You can see how I'm kind of just putting it in my hand, and I'm just kind of breaking pieces off and creating my pile of tinder here, right? And then the stuff that is a little bit bigger than the tinder, I'm just putting off to the side. You can see this is Brett's kind of like method of procuring or gathering firewood, right? All right, so tinder, get my little pile of tinder here going. That's perfect, right? So next I'm gonna move up to the next size. So tinder starts the fire. The next size up is probably the one that everybody already was gonna guess as being tinder, but it's not. It's called kindling. Kindling, that's the stuff that is about the size of a pencil thickness, maybe all the way to the size about like I can put my hand all the way around it and still touch my fingers together, okay? So even something like this would still be kindling. I can put my hand around it and still touch my fingers together. And I'm gonna start breaking this off into pieces maybe about the size of a pencil, right? And if I can break it with my hand, then that means that it's gonna be good. I don't wanna use firewood that I can't even break myself. So when you see people coming over to a fire with these giant logs that they can't break, that's just too big and that's not really gonna work well for a fire, all right? So kindling is what's going to get the fire going, okay? So tinder to start the fire, tiny tinder, and then kindling is kind of in the middling, right? And that's that medium-sized stuff that helps actually get the fire going. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. I can take this and I can break it. Maybe I can use my knee or my foot, and I can just kind of snap that. So that's some bigger tinder. You can hear that nice snap. This is good dead down and dry wood. All right, now the last one is called fuel, and that's the biggest part. When you go buy firewood, usually you're gonna get chunks of wood like this that have been split, right? Or big chunks of wood like this, right? That are big splits, okay? So fuel, that's gonna be your biggest stuff. That's what's gonna keep the fire going. So you wanna start it, you wanna get it going, and then you wanna keep it going. So once you start your fire with your tinder, you're gonna make sure that you have some kindling and maybe some varied sizes of kindling to keep your fire kind of like growing and growing, right? And then once your fire like is established and you have a fire, that's when you start adding fuel, and probably maybe some smaller fuel or bigger kindling before you start adding these big ones, okay? That's basically firewood. That's it. That's all you need to know. So reviewing everything, when you gather wood, you want to make sure that it's dead, down, and dry. Make sure you follow those 3 Ds. Make sure that you at least have the thought of like hardwood versus softwood. If I could find some pine, little pine twigs, they light up very, very fast. Even if I had some pine like this would be good to start in the fire. If I don't, then I just want to be conscious of having a lot of small tinder. If it's from a hardwood tree, it might take a little bit for it to light, and that's okay, but it's just like one of those things. Don't give up on it. And when you're starting a fire, my rule of thumb is I always have like 2 fistfuls of tinder to really start a fire. And I don't use anything like paper or cardboard or any of that kind of stuff. I use just wood, right? And you can easily do that, and I will show you how to do that in our next lesson. So the 3 Ds, dead, down, and dry. Then we have hardwood versus softwood, and then finally you have your tinder, your kindling, and your fuel, and that is all that you need to know about firewood. And then, like I said, in our next lesson, we'll go over actually how to build a fire and different types of fires, and maybe even why we have them. All right? Cool.